one of the reasons I think the Star Wars franchise is failing in the streaming is because they give the critics too much time to actually talk about it. These people aren't really fans. They like a thing or an aspect of it or something, or they like that there's a fandom there and they like to be a part of the group and they want to have their voice and they want to jump in there. And some of them are just mouths across the internet. And the reality is that they don't matter. Their opinion of it doesn't matter. Your opinion of it should matter when you watch it.
I was more in the camp of saying that I liked number 1. Number 2 it had its moments, but I was kind of like meh for most of it. And then episode 3 was like the greatest of all time. I guess you could attribute it to writing because I'm not really a romantic plot kind of guy. So the Anakin Padme love story kind of things in episode 2 were a bit off-putting for me because it didn't feel too, Star Warsy, I guess, for the same kind of method that the films were being told as, in that era compared to like the old ones. But I will say that's completely changed for me now.
Because they themselves are really, really tiny and they don't realize how tiny they actually really are.
I think this episode should be rated, if you're a flat earther, do not watch this, you might get offended.
Stand back. It's bullet time. Howdy, true believers, and welcome to another episode of Bullet Time Bites, where we break down the greatest moments and movements in nerd culture. I'm your host with the most and your forever guardian, Dynamo. And alongside me is my co-host Alex, and today we're diving into one of the most controversial and ultimately redeemed eras of cinema history, the Star Wars prequel trilogy. And joining us, we have the return of the one and only Michael Storm. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me back. I'm really excited to be here. I'm sorry I couldn't have been here for the second half of the Batman thing. That was really fun. Batman is one of my favorites. But Star Wars, I'm wearing the Bat hat, but I'm wearing the Star Wars.
Yes.
And that's not purposeful. That's me every single day. I'm probably wearing either or both.
I love that. And these are definitely the right episodes for you then.
Like half a dozen Batman logo shirts, different, like spray painted on or neon or something, and all different ages. Like this is really old, one of the original ones. Yeah.
Nah, I love that. Now, it's a shame that we couldn't get you for the previous episode, but you're here now, and
no, I'm glad to be back. Star Wars, man. You push the other button. I got my R2.
I love that.
Voice command thing.
Oh, absolutely love that.
Play. You use your phone too, driving around.
Amazing.
I've got something lovely here. I've got something lovely here as well. I've just knocked something over as well, so I'll have to fix that quickly. But I've got some flocked pop figures that I always have above my bed. I'm not sure if they're going to show very well because my camera's terrible.
I get the idea. I see Darth. I see a trooper.
Chewbacca. Luke.
Luke.
Oh, yeah.
Nice.
I love that.
Nice.
Yeah, I think I've got some of the pop figures in my drawer, but not coming in.
I also have a Darth Vader lightsaber above my bed, but because my camera won't show it, I won't be able to. But it's one of those. It's like one of those, proper ones. Like you press the button, it lights up and it has the sound effects and all that playing off. One of the collector's kinds of lightsabers.
Nice.
I still need to get my hand on the Kylo Ren one.
But you can't see it. Unfortunately, you can't see it. Just on the other side of Vampirilla, there is a Star Wars #1, the original Marvel 77, first print.
I love that. Yes, proper old edition. That I love that. But let's tell the fans why we're here, and that's because we are going to take a deep dive into a movie that was once considered the worst thing to happen to Star Wars and is now beloved by millions. So, from 1999 to 2005, George Lucas gave us The Phantom Menace, Attack of the Clones, and Revenge of the Sith. At their release, the prequels were a massive subject of pop culture backlash, with critics and fans decrying multiple elements of each film, including the dialogue, digital effects, and controversial characters like Jar Jar Binks. Although I think a lot of us love him now. But today,
But yeah, I never hated him. Fair enough, he might have been a bit over the top compared to the rest of the cast, but I never really hated Jar Jar.
No
I was
worse
a
than
small child.
3PO.
Yes. But I'm definitely a small child, so something like Jar Jar Binks got me excited. But I think today, Hayden Christensen says those movies have held up well over time and calls the current fan response a vindication for the work that we did. Where we have stuff like the Clone Wars animated series, where virtually every criticism fans had of the prequels was addressed and corrected, and we ended up having a new generation who grew up loving them, and suddenly the prequels don't look so bad, especially compared to what came after. Like we've mentioned before the call, and we'll touch on in a later episode. But today's mission, understanding how the Star Wars prequels went from universally panned, examining how the Clone Wars rehabilitated entire storylines, and debating whether they were always good or if we've just collectively forgotten how bad they actually were. So let's jump in and hit this at warp speed. All right, Alex, let's start with the hard truth. When The Phantom Menace hit theaters in 1999, fans had reactions ranging from melancholic disappointment to apoplectic rage. So we've seen them having all sorts of controversial outcries from this. So, Michael, I'll throw this to you, since you probably were one of those there that had. I mean, we were little children at that time, so
I wasn't even born. I was a 2000s kid.
I mean, I was just born in 99, so let's get someone who was actually there. What was it?
Yeah, I saw both the trilogies before you guys were born. All right, fair enough.
Insane. But what would you say were the core problems that turned fans against these films?
I don't know. I don't understand it. I really don't. I'm confused by the whole hating on it thing, because I never did hate him. I enjoyed the stories. I was obviously considerably older. I was in college at the time that these movies started coming out, and they started doing that new prequel trilogy, and I was already a collector of the figures from youth and the comic books and just anything. And for a while there, everything, literally, if it said Star Wars on it, I somewhere. And it was pretty bad for a while, kind of stupid, in fact. But I had fun with it, and in the end, I never lost any money on it. I just turned around and sold all this stuff. It was fine. So I just got to enjoy it. Star Wars has been core. I've been there for those three original. I was a little young for the first one, but still old enough to remember it. And I went to all of them in the theater. I went to all three of the prequels in the theater. In fact, I even hosted the first one at a theater here in Manhattan, Kansas. I was a DJ for a local radio station, and they introduced the trilogy, and so I got to be a part of introducing that new trilogy to a new generation. And so no, I don't understand it. I really don't. I'm the wrong person to ask. I really don't get expecting something going into something like that and expecting to, and I'm the guy that should have expected. I lived a Star Wars life. I've loved it all my life. I love the characters. I love the mythology. I'm not the super geek. I can't tell you about every single aspect of it, but I what I can talk about and what I know about, and I've seen all of the thing, everything they've thrown on the TV, all the new stuff. Heck, just before we got here, I was watching some. It's not created by Disney or anybody. It's just this. It's called For the Empire. If you guys have ever seen it, it's a YouTube thing, and it's these hapless sort of stormtrooper guys that sort of stumble through various events of the original trilogy and stuff. It's really fantastic. It's a Unreal thing. The guys animate using Unreal, and it's AFK, I think, is the page on YouTube, and it's just fantastic. It's wonderful. I love it. Just every bit of it, and it's just random people doing sort of more silly. Not it's not a movie. They're not trying to reach the billions of people or anything. They're just taking that little world of Star Wars and making their thing of it. So again, I guess I'm just the wrong guy to ask that question because I don't understand it. I love everything about it. I really do.
Well, at least there's one person that who went into it with an open mind from the start. So I'd love to see that. But yeah, I think looking at some of the controversial output online, as people said that the movies were goofy with the Jar Jar stuff, and they didn't like the 50s style diner in Attack of the Clones. People said that there were poor dialogue, questionable story choices, lack of emotional connection with characters.
Welcome to life.
And then obviously everything with the whole Anakin stuff with the teenage romance and everyone just getting really annoyed with the way Hayden Christensen portrayed Anakin, and just not a fan of the whole thing. People said he was whining too much throughout the movies. So, yeah, Alex, let's get some of your thoughts with the Backlash.
Okay, so obviously, as said before, I was born in 2000. So when I was first getting into Star Wars and that, at least as far as my mind can remember, I kind of always started with the prequel stuff and then went into sequels. I can't tell you if I ever saw the sequels firstly before the prequel, because we're talking like when I was single digit age, and let's face it, no one can remember everything from that time. But I never really understood necessarily the backlash that the prequels kind of had, especially the tones and such. Because again, as a kid, I'm just looking at Star Wars on the TV, and I'm mesmerized, being like, just seeing the world. You've got like the cool effects. You've got the lightsabers for both the Jedi and the Sith. You've got the awesome looking battle droids. You've got clones, and you've got the Empire. You've got the Rebels. I kind of look at it like two sides fighting each other. Essentially, it's just their designs, what they're doing. Like, are these the good guys, the bad guys? You're just looking at it basically very simple. You're not looking deep down onto like the sublime messages that follow with the certain characters and what they stand for and that. You're just thinking in the end, good, bad. I like this person. I like this person. This guy looks cool. She's awesome. Just that, but. Exactly. But one thing I will say, though, and it is something that I think I held at least when I was a lot younger, and my preferences, is that when it came to certain films, and you'd hear about people dogpiling on the prequels, I was more in the camp of saying that I liked number one. Number two it had its moments, but I was kind of like meh for most of it. And then episode 3 was like the greatest of all time. But it was I guess you could attribute it to writing, because I'm not really a romantic plot kind of guy. So the Anakin Padme love story kind of things in episode 2 were a bit off-putting for me, because it didn't feel too Star Warsy, I guess, for the same kind of method that the films were being told as in that era compared to like the old ones. But I will say that's completely changed for me now. Whilst there are obviously still moments I like and don't like about the films, it's not purely based on, say like bad writing or like bad characters or, the tone or whatever, because I just think of it now as just like, yeah, it's a different time when these were shot and different writing and that. But compared to the original trilogy, which was just essentially like a galaxy's dominated by the bad guys, the good guys are rebels, they're basically like the underdogs, you're kind of rooting for them. It's a completely different tone entirely because we've got essentially like the equivalent of a modern day intergalactic diplomatic system set up for, everything going on. It's completely different than what we had with the Empire, and it's just the bad guys are operating from the shadows more than being like all the way at the front like they were with the Stormtroopers and Darth Vader and that in the Empire. So, it's already completely different tones, but I never really necessarily saw any of the things in the films, at least nowadays, how I look back on them. I never really saw, much to criticize about. Just, it's just written differently because it's telling about a different time. Kind of like, the calm before the storm kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Everyone's not necessarily panicked about stuff. I mean, serious problems like you would have in nowadays, diplomatic issues between, say, like neighboring countries or continents, but it's not as it's not like post-apocalyptic or so. It's just a different way of telling how everything's going
True.
on, and that's all I think I can really just say at the moment. That's all it really is to me. I think maybe people might have just potentially reacted badly just because the tone is so different than originally that with how it would have been written, it would have felt probably completely alien to them. It would have been completely different than what Star Wars was to them when the first 3 films came out. Because for me, I love this stuff. I never thought of it, deep down. I just thought what I liked and what I didn't like, just on the pure basic principle of simplicity, rather than, looking at them like, it was almost like the best thing ever.
Yeah, and I think that well, pretty much how I grew up and viewed the prequels. That I absolutely loved them. I mean, I never really saw any of the Backlash stuff because, as a kid, like around where I was, everyone was loving the prequels. Everyone wanted to be either Anakin or Obi-Wan or whatnot. And I remember all the playground shenanigans.
Exactly. That's what you're thinking about at the end. You're thinking, oh, I want to be Obi-Wan. I want to be Anakin. I want to be Darth Maul. You want to be like the cool characters in the playground. You're not thinking like, boo, episode 1 sucks, or boo, prequels altogether ruin Star Wars. You're not thinking about that. You're just thinking, can I be this cool character?
You're not thinking, oh, the philosophy work as a like 5 to 10-year-old. You're not thinking about the plot points. You're thinking lightsabers fun.
Exactly. It's not like the Big Bang Theory. It's not like we're all going to be saying like we don't like episode 1, so we skip it or something like that. You're like 7, 8, maybe even like 10 years old at the most. You're not thinking about this. You're just thinking, Wars. You're not thinking about the good and the bad, and yet, on the other side of the coin, you've got the people like us doing that, and then you've got other people which fair enough to them because I like a good criticism of the goods, the bads, and what has potential at least of anything. I find it engaging to get people's opinions, but then you get these people that argue and they're so, I guess, so strongly committed to their beliefs. They're just a bit harder to try and get your kind of ideals to share and just take it along.
I hate the prequels. That's a big statement. Just to say that, using the word hate to describe 3 movies that you voluntarily watched and you can just they were whatever, you don't get the 6-7 hours of your life back or whatever you spent on them, but to live in that space,
hating
where and who are we to even say anything about any of them taken individually by themselves without any other consideration, without any other expectation of them? That's what requires, that's what requires then at this point coming along and looking at the theatrics of it, looking at the acting, looking at the directing, looking at the vision of it to see if there really was something cohesive. Because obviously even as just post college, really going and seeing these things, I go into them with a childlike wonder. I don't go into it with any expectation. I just want to be entertained, and I don't know what to expect anyways. I already know going in there that they're not telling the story of Luke Skywalker and Han Solo and C-3PO and R2D2, except, well, look, there's C-3PO and R2D2. Hey, that's kind of neat. That's connected. And that guy grows up to be Darth Vader, and so they weren't telling this story that I already knew. It was a story I didn't know. So how am I to tell him how it should or shouldn't be told? And the fact you pointed out the idea that everything is flipped around. Maybe if the original trilogy, if they've been done in order at a time, maybe they would have fit a little bit more with the time, because if you look at the Empire then being particularly stifling, having destroyed the Republic, pulled the Republic apart from within, you might get some kind of parallels to current realities. Yeah.
Yeah, give that. But along those there, what would you say the elements that worked in the prequels was it work then and still work now?
Yeah, I guess you have to narrow something down. All right, so the politics, yeah, absolutely, the politics works. It may be slow moving, it may be slow developed, but it works. The love story works too. I get exactly what you're saying, Alex, about the not caring. That's one of the things that I've always found weird about sort of particular sexual representations within movies or television or comic books or anything like that. Because if I'm going looking for something sexual, I go looking for something sexual. I don't care about any of that when I go to watch Star Wars. It's of no interest to me. So I absolutely get it. But it also, we all know going into it that it's core to the story, that the Jedi aren't supposed to love, and that it's the torn apart relationships, and it's the all the fear and the anger and the growing up a whiny little pissant. That those are the things that actually create somebody who's an authoritarian, somebody who's supports, that is the Emperor's right hand man.
Yeah.
I mean, when you put it like that, like as an adult, I appreciate those sentiments a lot more now, because again, you don't really think of that kind of thing when you're young. But the point that you make up right there, as an adult, I appreciate them. Like, I understand them, and I actually believe that they are important for this part of the story. Like, because it makes sense. It like literally, if it was also for like the romantic subplot things, like in episode 2, for example, it wouldn't even show like the eventual rise to Darth Vader. Wouldn't even show Luke and Leia's conception, essentially their birth. It wouldn't even lead into these, so it's like tying in like the really small fibers of the story that actually mean the most. And when you put things like that as well, like saying about the Jedi aren't meant to do this and not meant to do this, as a kid you're probably not thinking too much of that, but when you think about it, looking at both sides, like the Jedi, the Sith, and like anyone else in between, like a spectrum or something of like morality, it's much more fun to think about those things and enjoy, because then you can see where things went right, where things went wrong for a character in their life story that leads to these. So, it is important. You may not like it, but like it or not, it's an important canonical event, essentially, like pivot points that lead to something, and it's a reflection of our own lives as well. Like, I feel like you just appreciate these kind of things a bit more, even if it's a plot in a film that you don't frankly care about. On a small level, everyone does care. They just don't necessarily want to admit it, just in case it, contradicts any of their personal opinions.
Yeah, definitely get that. Talking about opinions and fan discourse, here's what interests me. So I've seen that some fans say that the prequels had so much awesome stuff in them despite poor direction and being bad movies. So would you guys say that a movie can be both bad and good simultaneously?
Yeah, of course it can. Like, it could be a mid-film at most with, like, some good things and some bad things, but, just depending on how they're handled, and, like, if it was a missed opportunity that they could have done more with, then, that's fair enough. All fiction's like that in the end. Like, whether it's a manga series, whether it's just an ordinary book series, or if it's a TV series, you'll have your good points, your bad points, it's all part of the process. It just goes to show that they had their ideas, we have our ideas of what worked, what didn't work, and it's just, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it's just something to think about for the future.
That is very true.
Well, it makes me wonder what George Lucas would do if he could go back and remake those movies now. Those three, those three movies. We got to see his sort of updated vision or whatever for the original trilogy when he came in and added a few things. Which out of all the stuff, while we're there, when I said I love all the Star Wars stuff, let's be clear: the Han shot first thing. Come on, that was the worst thing that was ever done, because you changed it. You really got at the heart of somebody like myself, who likes the Han Solo character more than he likes any other character in it. I'm not a Luke Skywalker. I'm definitely not an Obi-Wan Kenobi. I'm certainly not a Darth Vader. I'm a Han Solo. That's who and there was a bunch of us out there too that were like that. And so yeah, that's why that becomes such a thing, obviously. But yeah, that was the one thing I didn't like about him. I loved it. I love the whole mythology. The development of it over the years has been a little bit painful and has been a little bit slow, and it's not gotten any better. And like you were talking about, Alex, how it's destroying the sort of want for it, and it's sad to watch a little bit, because you imagine that at some point you'll turn on Disney Plus and there won't be any new Star Wars stuff anymore. They will have killed it.
Yeah, which is pretty
Yeah.
much where it's going at this
Although
point.
I think in most cases for that, at least my opinion, again, just I feel like what truly kills fandom altogether is just the fans themselves rather than the people who make the content. Because fair enough, you want to criticize something, you criticize something, but the moment that it starts becoming so pivotal to your personality and your general beliefs of how something should be, that you would basically crucify anyone else who's slightly
Yeah, no, it's silly.
disapproved of you. It kills everything. That's why so many different fandoms then are regarded as toxic, and you hear well, I'm a Star Wars fan, really? Oh, right, what's your favorite trilogy? Oh, I like the sequels, fair enough, your opinion like that, but the moment you start then hating someone because of that,
Yeah,
kills
right.
fandom. It just makes it way bad, and that's probably then when a lot of people
So
thinking, just
weird.
end it so we can stop
Yes.
this.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it gets so
right.
annoying when the fans start becoming like that. That's how a lot of fun stuff, or even media that it's not totally turned sour yet, but people, all that toxicity from the fandom just completely killed it off completely.
Yeah, there's
True,
a
but
thing.
it's like
They've had some problems of their own. Let's be honest. Kathleen Kennedy was responsible for spearheading a very unclear. Let's just put it that way: unclear vision of what Star Wars should be and where it should go in the future. And they did this sort of shotgun approach to things. And I'm one of the ones that I'm honest about all of it. If I don't like it, I don't like it. If it's not good, it's not good. So I enjoy most of the stuff. It has its high points, it has its low points. But one of the biggest problems that they've done is trying to balance the streaming part of it, because you can go to the theater for the big Star Wars movie event thing, and that's all fine, but then you have all this other little stuff going on. And I think I may have mentioned this even on the last show when we were talking about Batman, just in general, about why some of these bigger franchises are failing in some places and why they work better in other places. One of the reasons I think the Star Wars franchise is failing in the streaming is because they give the critics too much time to actually talk about it. They spread it out over 6, 8, 9, 12 weeks, whatever it is, this presentation. And so after every single episode, all these haters, all these toxic people, the ones that actually do exist within the realm, and usually they're not fans. These people aren't really fans. They like a thing or an aspect of it or something, or they like that there's a fandom there and they like to be a part of the group and they want to have their voice and they want to jump in there. And some of them are just mouths across the internet. And the reality is that they don't matter. Their opinion of it doesn't matter. Your opinion of it should matter when you watch it. And it's toxic to the pool of people watching it. If they would drop these things all at once and let people watch them as they are, there'd be no time. You can't trash a series before the series is complete.
That is true, and definitely starts to get annoying when these so-called critics try to make their voice heard and end up damaging more than it should be.
It's
Exactly.
everywhere. It's in any big thing. It doesn't matter whether it is if it's comic books, if it's Magic the Gathering, card games, and stuff like that. Disney card games.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. It's all there because it's toxic people. It's people that they're not comfortable with themselves for whatever reason, and so they're constantly externalizing everything, and everything has to meet their expectations, and the world has to go a certain way, or they kind of break down. They just they don't have any ability to understand that they're not the most important thing in the world, and that not everything that happens in the world has anything to do with them. In fact, most of what happens everywhere, every time, has nothing to do with them. And there are people that just live so big. That's why there are people that still believe that the earth is flat, because their brains are flat, because they themselves are really, really tiny, and they don't realize how tiny they actually really are.
Yeah.
I think this episode should be rated. If you're a flat earther, do not watch this. You might get offended.
Good.
But yeah, you make a good point there as well, because I actually saw something recently as well, talking again about copyright law and like how certain things come into public domain. So you got to think, if these people that have such a strong opinion about what something should be, then decides to take this and makes their own stuff with it, whether again it's like a comic, if it's a TV show, if it's a film itself that technically retcons or like alternate timelines, say like episode 4, but then this happened, and then it's created a new event kind of thing, like you do see in some of the what if kind of Star Wars comics, like what if the Battle of Yavin had gone completely different and the Death Star won. You get some good stories like that, but imagine these people make this kind of film or this kind of series in their own right, and then they try to publish it, and it gets, say, completely
no, it never
blasted
happened,
by
because
everyone
that's not
else.
who they are. If they were the kind of people that could and would do something like that, they would do that. They would be the AFK that I was talking about, that YouTube people. That's what they did. They said, you know what? There's a space for some stories that are interesting in a universe we love. Let's see if we can do it. And they did, and they do, and they've been very successful at it, and it's neat. And Disney doesn't come after them and beat them up about stuff. There's something out there for everybody if you're kind of looking for it, and there's something to hate on for everybody if you're looking for that. And I think that's just what so many of those people are. They just look for something to hate on.
Yeah, so
Exactly.
such a
Like,
waste of
imagine that
energy
they
as
put something
well.
out that they love, and then it gets hated on there, and then they're like, "What? Why does everyone hate it? This is literally what it's supposed to be." It's once you get past that, that shallow bubble of your opinion, and you see that your bubble isn't as big as, like, say, the collective group of everyone else's. That's where I really feel like then people finally, or at least I hope so, would finally have a bit of an awakening and think, "Oh wow, you know what? Maybe my opinion is not, the driving force of what something should be." And if you tie it back in again with what we were saying about the prequels, this was an extension of George Lucas's vision for the Star Wars universe. Like, if
It
we
was
just
kind of
got rid of
stories
and
that
replaced
even
it,
I already knew, in a general sense. These were things that I knew as a child growing up. These were already stories that people had talked about, that George Lucas himself had talked about, and ideas that already existed. There's nothing about any of those trilogies that we didn't know, though, of that trilogy, that we didn't know was coming. That any, I don't know what you call, true Star Wars fan, whatever. Certainly somebody like myself who invested enough of his past and money into it to enjoy the franchise, to be able to say something about it and know something about it, and expect what was coming. We knew the Clone Wars were there. We knew that Obi-Wan and Anakin are grow together and then grow apart in battle, and that's how ultimately Darth Vader is born. So there wasn't any particular surprise there to anybody who wanted the George Lucas vision. Just because they didn't spell it out exactly as everybody had imagined it for the previous 20 years, it doesn't mean that it wasn't the right vision.
For sure.
Because imagine if they just like covered everything all at one time. Like you gave like the brief rundown of what the prequels were in, say, like 10 minutes overall for like the entirety of the sequel trilogy. Oh, sorry, I mean like the original trilogy. Just you got it there. What's more to talk about? You've got everything there, but the fact that the clues were there that could then tie into something much more, then that's fine. It's all there. It's just if it didn't plan out the way you were planning it out to be, just keep in mind you didn't create this. You may have your idea of how this might have gone, but at the end of the day, this is one man who's
Little
telling
silly.
one story
Oh,
about his
yes.
own characters, about a universe he created.
Well, we could argue
Everyone
that
can have their
too.
own opinions, but the prequels are essentially maybe they're not 100% what George Lucas might have wanted. Maybe he might have even contradicted himself in some cases, but
Hard to say.
it's his vision in the end, and he gave it because he wanted to share it with us, like every other person who's ever created something that was so amazing that it hit the phenomenon of the zeitgeist, and everyone just got on board with it. Like again, whether it's things like One Piece, whether it's something like Game of Thrones, it happens, and this is what happens as a result of it. They may be handled in different ways, but it's one person sharing their vision because they think, I think a decent amount of people might actually enjoy this, and I want to do what I can to feed that creativity in their brains. See what they want to put out, and that's where you get all these fan videos and that coming out, like people doing their own like small little independent battles of what say happens in the Clone Wars.
Yeah.
There's so
And you know
much of
what?
it on
That's
YouTube.
great.
Yeah, for sure. But
Yeah, I've
I
seen
think
some of them, like great stuff.
But I think one thing the prequels gave strength to, and probably end up creating a bit of this stuff where people think they can just do their own fan fiction. The prequels, the way they had the breaks in between the movies and like the time skips and whatnot provided clear ground for people to start imagining their own stuff and writing fan fiction, which in a way is great because we now get some of the different stuff that we see now. Michael, you mentioned with the AFK from YouTube, but then we also get the bad side of it where it started allowing the toxic fandom to start rising even more and start throwing what their own ideas into the mix. And I mean, we already had them hating us stuff, obviously from before prequels and stuff, but I feel like it got even stronger during the time of the prequels.
Yeah, it's just a weird thing for me to even consider because I truly am I just want to be entertained.
Yeah.
I call myself the bad fan. I have for a long time but I'm really actually the best fan because I let them just make what they want to make and I let it be what it is and I either like it or I don't. And I'm either entertained or I'm not. It really is that simple for me. And I'm mostly a laughs guy. So for me to even remotely be interested in a dramatic space western, and let alone for it to be, I wouldn't say pivotal, but I do own a comic book shop.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm certainly steeped in the spaces that Star Wars is found. And I'm the guy that I shouldn't necessarily like something like that, maybe, but it's a great story. It's a fun universe, and it's fun to imagine. I've imagined creating my own stuff within those universes. I don't know how many times over the years I thought, oh man, I would love to do my own Star Wars story or whatever.
And I definitely feel that the prequels definitely gave room for that kind of imagination, and I absolutely love that. Let's talk about the game changer now. The Clone Wars animated series fundamentally altered how people view the prequel trilogy. Break this down for the fans at home of why this show mattered so much.
You asked about Clone Wars? I'll tell you about Clone Wars.
Clone Wars
is freaking awesome. I'm a cartoon guy. That's the one thing that no matter what, I will always go back to cartoons. I grew up watching Bugs Bunny and then Animaniacs after that, and there's all these others in there as well. Ren and Stimpy and Beavis and Butthead and the Max and Aeon Flux and a million other stories from Japan to America, all over. So I love cartoons, and so Clone Wars cartoon was amazing. And when Gendy Tartakovsky did that Clone Wars cartoon, that was amazing. And then they stopped doing that Clone Wars cartoon, and then they did another Clone Wars cartoon movie, which was terrible. It was fine, whatever. But then they did another Clone Wars cartoon series, which was amazing, and it took them almost 20 years to complete the thing, but they finally did, and they came back with that final season with Ahsoka and following up on her, and it was just, I love it. Oh my God. Yeah.
Love this.
And Rebels
Rebels.
and all the other
Rebels.
cartoon. Okay, but yeah, you asked Alex about Clone Wars.
Yeah, sorry, I had a bit of connection problems. Would you mind just giving me like a quick rundown of things said over like the last 2 minutes or so? Because I was having moments where I could hear stuff, but then everything kind of froze and I couldn't hear a thing.
Yeah, no worries. So I just mentioned how the Clone Wars animated series fundamentally altered how people view the prequel trilogy. So I'm just going to ask you to break this down for the fans at home, why that series mattered so much.
Okay, well, just so everyone knows ahead of time, I haven't finished the Clone Wars just yet, but I was there when the film came out, when the series was greenlit, but I am watching it again at the moment because I've had the drive, especially the access, because I've been able to now, see all the things put out behind streaming services as such of all the different content that's been created. So I am getting around to seeing it all. But the Clone Wars, I absolutely love because I mean, granted, there was that cartoon version of it that came out before that, tried to fill in the gaps as well. The ones I think that also did Samurai Jack.
That was what you missed while you were gone, that's what I talked about. I said, they made this amazing Clone Wars cartoon, and I talked about the Genndy Tartakovsky one, and then, of course, how they ended that, and then they made that movie, which was... whatever. It was fine. And then they did the proper Clone Wars cartoon. Yeah, that was all you missed.
Yeah. I understand like people with the film saying like it was like meh, like it was an enjoyable watch, but I feel like it's only because of the series, because of like what they did with the film, that just being the flagship for it. The actual series itself then carried
no doubt. Yeah, the battle.
Not only that as well, but one of the main things that I loved about it, that not only did it introduce like us more to the actual world of Star Wars, doing something that live action probably would not be able to cover as fast a pace as say a digital animation would, but it also flashes out like so many different kinds of people in a way that we probably wouldn't see. Like not only does it build on the characters that we're already exposed to, like Obi-Wan and Anakin, for example, but it then gets to introduce like to legend characters or characters that might not have had much chance to shine otherwise, like Asajj Ventress, the reintroduction of Darth Maul and taking him further than just being that one guy who showed up in that one film, and hell, even like giving the clones a bigger personality, because I generally find that interesting. They're all basically the same clone of one bounty hunter who could basically be picked as being the best at killing Jedi, Jango Fett, and yet you take like the millions, if not billions, of different potential clones that come from him and give them their own personalities, styles, hairdos, face markings, all that. You just created a ton of characters out of one person, and I like seeing that little diversity, that they all have kind of like the same kind of mindset. We're brothers, we're bred for this, but then they're all like, they all have their own things where some are softer than others, some are, well, more morally inept in some cases, like Commander Fox, but you get a whole bunch of different characters and seeing how they interact with each other's and the Jedis that they're around. It's one of the things I really loved about it, and I think most of it mostly just came from Domino Squad, and the fact that it came out where I can have these kind of feelings where I'm like, I love Star Wars so much more because it put a deeper dive into the world that we never saw before. Like, we never saw anything about, say, the various different stormtroopers in the Empire, for example. The fact that we can see this, and it's not just like a fan animation made out of, say, like Legos and that, which I used to watch a lot of when I was younger, and I enjoyed those for the same kind of reasons. But this stuff, professionally done, it just reignited the love I had for these kind of people, and just thinking, you know what, I like the clones a lot more than I gave them credit for, than in like, the two films where they turned up. And I feel like a lot of people share those sentiments, thinking that this kind of stuff has actually greatly impacted my appreciation for the prequel stuff as well, because it's a part of the same timeline in the same universe.
for sure. I absolutely love what they've done with the clones, and even like the new spin-off to be making now, like with the Bad Batch. Absolutely loving the Bad Batch. So it's just really fun to see all these different stuff they're doing with the clones now and stuff. And then we also, like I said, we got the introduction of we got Ahsoka, we got Asajj Ventress, we got Hondo, outside of Hondo. So all these characters that they were able to give us, and the new stories that we got, really feels like a whole new world was created just from that animated series.
And yet, at the same
Well, and they
time, when you
thought it
imagine
was
like the time
important and
skips.
pivotal. What's that?
Sorry, I
No
was
problem.
saying, like, when you think about the time skips and, all the content that could hypothetically have filled those in, look how much you get out of the Clone Wars just on its own between episode 2 and 3. Like, you get so much, you get to see so many more battles, you're introduced to so many different kinds of characters, and again, they get more fleshed out as well, where you see, like, their designs change to make them, show their age, like, where you see Ahsoka, she first comes in as a Padawan, then she grows up into more what will become a Jedi Knight, and then obviously the whole temple bombing kind of thing that then leads to her leading the Order, and eventually seeing her re-enter as not Jedi, but still a force sensitive being caught up in the tribulations of the universe. It's just phenomenal. Like, it's great storytelling, and you get to see all these amazing characters that wouldn't have existed without it. Because without this show, we would never have even known anything about Ahsoka. We would have just thought that the main people were just Obi-Wan and Anakin in the prequels, and you never would have thought, hey, remember that time Anakin had a Padawan, Ahsoka? A lot of people probably would even say Ahsoka's their favorite character compared to those two, and those two are literally, well, legacy characters, just, in their younger days.
True.
Yeah, Ahsoka's become a legacy character. That's the beauty of it. That's it. And that's what I started to say, is that they found it important enough to come back like a decade later and finish the story. So if you haven't finished watching it yet, they come back and they do the rest of the Ahsoka story after she leaves the Order, at least up to the point where you start to get into Rebels territory and things like that, and in that timeline, in that time period. And so it's there's so much more yet for you to enjoy along the Ahsoka storyline, for sure, because that last season, the official last season, it was so important to them that they came back. They're like, it's not even finished. Let's just do it. We're going to put it out there. We don't have any more money. They're not backing it anymore. It's done. Let's just put it out there. And you can tell in the transitions. If you go back and you watch the first few seasons, 6 seasons, whatever it is, and they're polished in the transition from one scene or a commercial out of a commercial break and the beginnings of them, the introduction, they're all polished. So you have that what is it, the war propaganda sort of voiceover thing that's going on and telling this story, and we find Anakin and Obi-Wan on the planet of that whole thing, and that's missing. That stuff is all missing from it. But it was so important to the story because it was all about Ahsoka, and of course they were going to do this series, and they had all this bigger vision for the streaming stuff where it was all tied in with all the other streaming shows that they'd done, the Mandalorian and all that. So they knew all that stuff was in the works and that they were doing that, and they wanted to go back and tell that story, and it was an amazing job. It's weird that it was never put out there in the first place. That's what that's, you go back and you watch it, it's like, wow, why didn't they finish this? Why didn't this come out at the time?
True. And I absolutely love what they've done with it, and just how it's building upon everything. But here's what fascinates me. The Clone Wars provides important context and character development that makes the prequels even more emotional. So do you say that this show fixed the negative parts of the prequels, or did it just give us a better version of what the prequels was intended to be?
Scope of story. something we talked about. It's just so big. The Clone Wars is a big story. It's a huge tale. It's a lot of stories. It's apparently 7 or so seasons of cartoons, and then a whole bunch of other stuff as well. So yeah, it's a bigger story than 3 movies that are trying to get to. Darth Vader was a kid. He fell in love, and he wasn't supposed to, and he was kind of a brat, and he had a little too much power and not enough responsibility. Oh no. And becomes this bad guy, because that's where you get it. That's none of the rest of it matters. Is the only thing that matters is Darth Vader, little boy Darth Vader.
Yeah, true. Alex, what are your thoughts on that? And do you feel that the Clone Wars show improved the prequels? Or...
Oh, well, like I said before, the Clone Wars definitely did improve the sequel, the prequel trilogies, just because of the expanded characters. But one thing that I appreciated, at least from what I have saw, because like I said, I am on a rewatch to finish everything, including the final season. Whilst I have seen like clips of that in between as well, I will say it does do a lot more of a benefit for Anakin as well, because I have heard a lot of people and other content creators saying that one thing that they didn't really like too much about the prequels was because Anakin's fall to the dark side felt rushed. But upon reviewing it again as an adult, when you think about it, when he first starts showing proper signs of, falling to the dark side, at least when he is a Jedi, when you look back to how he is, he's like 19 in Attack of the Clones. He's like he's still relatively young. Like people who are 19 will, still have a few problems here and there, especially if you're in an order of celibate knights that tell you can't do this, you can't do that. He already has all these weaknesses that they pointed out, even as he was a young boy, saying he's a bit too old to start off as a youngling. He's got these attachments to his mother. We're not meant to have them. And then, you go straight through into Revenge of the Sith. You see he kills Count Dooku. Jedi aren't really supposed to kill people. And then you just kind of see the events of the film, and it just almost seems like it's rushed. There's a lot of things that the Clone Wars actually does to help that. Like, for one thing, obviously, with pacing in that, Revenge of the Sith actually isn't like, say, a week-long event or anything like that. Someone actually points out that it's kind of supposed to be like many weeks, many months apart and such. It's just, shot a bit weirdly, that it almost feels like every kind of thing that happens is, going off back to back rather than, rather than it all just happening, say months apart, like, the Battle of the Coruscant leading to General Grievous and then Order 66 carrying out, it's all kind of like blurred misunderstanding for how long it takes. But one thing, when you look at like episode 2 to 3, it's only like a 3-year gap, but then most of Anakin's fall to the dark side is mainly in episode 3. The Clone Wars just gives him kind of like more backstory to his general fall, where you see like him killing people, him doing un-Jedi like things, him developing new attachments to people and relations, that when these things fall through, it just exemplifies these problems they previously pointed out. Like, just with Ahsoka, for example, imagine you got a Padawan you don't want, but then you grow to, appreciate her, you start to care for her, you want to, see her do well, like, so well to the point that you pre-trained her to basically survive Order 66, against the clones. But, her leaving just exemplifies it. Anakin again killing people, the whole prophecy of the Chosen One essentially weighing down on him, and him generally still being viewed a bit as a nuisance, even in the shadows by the Council. It just kind of gives a little bit more, a little more to focus on, to say, yeah, clearly the writing was on the wall. This is someone who is clearly having problems that needs more guidance and training, and yet you see the flaws that, the Jedi did nothing basically to stop it. They saw he was essentially a problem in their eyes, and they did nothing about it. It was all just, we have to have faith in him, he's a good person, but, nothing really changed, because obviously look where it led. It led to the Jedi getting completely slaughtered because they didn't do anything to stop him. But I like that part, at least, of the Clone Wars, thinking that it just gave so much more to the prequels. Just,
Really
you
did.
know, a few more things to pick up on that when you later go back and look at it on a rewatch, you're like, oh, wow, yeah, that was actually pretty decent in terms of the fact that they didn't just spell it out for us. They actually gave us, you know, the hints to say, oh, yeah, there is definitely something wrong here. Especially because, again, if you're a child, you're not really looking at it like that. But then as an adult, you're thinking, you know what, this is actually a lot better than I gave it credit for. So I'd say that at least, but most of it would just be, you know, the addition of characters filling in, you know, the massive time leaps where it's like, wait, what happened in like the last 3 years or so?
Yeah.
And then you get to see all the other things that happened. It just enriches the character's experience and even just shows that all of the characters have had so many other things affect them and contribute to their story to bring them to who they would be in the original trilogy if, you know, they were around for then, or their significance that leads to these characters being built up in the original trilogy. It just gives you so much more appreciation for the prequels and everything they set up, even if it wasn't, you know, all live action.
True. Talking about perspective and appreciation, a couple of critics say that our selective memories, generational shifts, and new material has made the prequels look better in different contexts. So, would you guys say that the prequel love is genuine, or are we just nostalgic for our younger years?
Maybe you might be able to say that maybe if I wasn't in the conversation, maybe if you had somebody who wasn't Gen X, somebody who didn't grow up with it and could appreciate it all along. It spoke of the politics at the time. It speaks of the politics of empire, and it speaks of the growth and and what can drive empire. You know, that's one of the beautiful things about the Clone Wars series, that cartoon, and completing some of that in there. You see the banking, you see the manipulation of markets and currencies, and you see the total control by the Republic becoming the Empire, all of the above. And it tells a story that is reflected in reality. It's reflected in history. It's happening in our own time. We're watching what some people will argue is the slow decline of America and America's influence on the world. And as an American, I kind of agree in a lot of ways. Certainly, what we see today is not what founded this nation here. And so the stories that are being told are they're human stories, and that's why they're relatable, and that's why they really stand the test of time when people go back and look at them, especially when they're older. Because it's the conversation that we're having now. I had the benefit of already being older and already understanding these things. You guys have grown up, or you watch them now again and look at them and see the value in them as an adult. And so I think it's just a natural thing, and I think it just happens. That's, you know, the storytellers are telling the story of their time. It was the problems with empire and how empires are built and how they collapse and how the individuals within empires can have problems that are that have wide-ranging consequences are true stories, and they're just being told in their time and space. And maybe we have a little bit more understanding now, because if you look at the prequel trilogy, it's just before the internet really breaks out.
True.
It really is. It's happening right in that time period, but it's really just before it. It really happens just before it, and then of course that's 20 years before everybody is in their home. Everybody has a camera. Everybody's watching what's on the internet, because that didn't really happen until COVID. So
Yeah, you're right. With it is really interesting with the Empire stuff, the politics that they have in it, and it's really some of the politics parallel to our time, especially with how much worse things are getting, and it feels like we are sort of heading towards an unstable era. And so it is interesting the parallels between Star Wars and actual real life.
well, yeah, I mean, it makes sense. America is that example of that particular empire because it goes from a republic to an empire. And what was it that Ben Franklin? Was it Franklin? I don't know. It seems like it was Ben Franklin. It's somebody, one of those guys from back then, walking out of a courthouse somewhere, saying to somebody, "You have a republic if you can keep it." And so that's the story. That's the story of history. Oh, we set up this wonderful, idyllic place, and then we have these wonderful times of growth and wealth, and people are happy. And then we have these empires that build up, and we have this class of people, the political class, the politicians themselves, who are not net producers of anything in society, and you see the destruction that it brings around as they want more wealth, they want more power, and they have to extract all of that from the existing population, and they have to keep the population from trying to take it back. It's just it's the story of human conquest.
Yeah. It's a very interesting story, and I think those parallels are what allow people to connect to the movies. Alex, first of all, great. Are you finally back, or are you still freezing up?
He's not moving. I'm
No,
gonna
no.
say he's freezing. I mean, he's a stoic man, but I don't think anybody's that stoic.
No.
That happens. What are you gonna do? It's technology. And what are we, a million miles apart, something like that? Oh.
Alex, are you with us now?
Hey, there he's moving.
Oh, sorry, I've had a connection issue. I can hear audio again. It's coming in and out. What did you say?
I was just saying that, well, the parallels between Star Wars. Are you there?
Sorry, I'm not sure if you can hear me. It's
awesome.
failing again. I'll be back in a second. I'm just gonna swap to audio.
I think he's just having trouble. There's no two ways about it.
All right, cool, no worries.
Oh. It's like he's going through hyperspace or something.
Yeah.
Warps in and out.
Yeah, making this futuristic stuff a bit too realistic.
Yeah, right. Well, that imagine the struggles of communications in subspace or something like that.
Oh God, no.
As opposed, we had trouble just connecting across the pond, as it were, and and you guys are closer to each other than you are to me. I'm sure.
I mean, it's like around the corner from me.
All right, I'm back on. Can I just check? Am I coming through all right?
Nice.
Yeah, sound all right.
All right,
but we can sort that.
Sorry about that. So let's try again. What question did you say?
Yeah. So I was just saying that. Where were we? Oh yeah, we were talking about the parallels between the Star Wars politics and the Empire related to today's current climate and where the world is heading towards. So, what are your views on the parallels between Star Wars and the current world?
I think one of the things I kind of see, at least Star Wars portraying, obviously, on a bit of a hyper enlarged scale, is that the worlds of politics is obviously it's always going to be a very dangerous game, like especially to the point where it actually divulges into people engaging in physical conflict with each other, whether it's just small scale, like you get the odd few people who decide to start fighting back, or on like a large scale one where it's literally creating divisions in a civil war, or even if it's just like one small group of people who have been given all the power compared to like the vast majority of the people who just want like basic freedom, and they don't want things complicated, like how you could say things happen in, say, massive countries of global influence like, say, the US, or even right here in the UK. But it's just the way it's handled. I feel like even on the small things, like with the prequels, when you look at the trade route problems in the first episode, because that's kind of what the main universal background thing was. It all just started off about negotiations about a trade blockade going on Naboo, and then it extends further into a full-on Clone Wars against
the CIS and the Republic, and then eventually into the original trilogies. It's just a group of freedom fighters, the Rebel Alliance, against a massive dominating force, the Empire. It just seems like it rings so true on like any level, just obviously, you know, made out to be much worse than it is, because let's face it, no government themselves have like, you know, a world destroying machine. But when you think about nowadays and, you know, the threat of another world war, or the threat of like, say, nuclear annihilation, the Death Star starts seeming less of a fantasy and more just like just a hyper
Have you heard about
exaggerated
railguns in
realism.
space? Let me tell you about railguns in space.
but yeah, it's just like Star Wars just kind of hyper analyzes, you know, people's concerns when it comes to politics or like world authoritarianism. And I feel like it just does it in a way that just exaggerates it, just to make it a much more deadly force than how it, you know, realistically is society. But it does also keep, you know, the general concerns people have, and, you know, the reasons to be a bit concerned about, you know,
Well,
the people
it's relative,
in control.
right? Isn't it? It is relative. To some of us, our entire world is something that the for most of us, our entire world is something that any government of any decent size could, you know, unobstructed, wipe out.
I mean, that is true. I won't lie about that.
No,
The general
just the direct parallels, because it's important, again, because we're talking about it, you know, these things reflecting in time and reflecting the values of a time, and the difference between watching them at the time and then understanding them from a distance and being able to look back at them and see, and with historical context, because one of the things that you missed, I was talking about, I think it's Thomas Jefferson. I think I said Ben Franklin, but whatever. Thomas Jefferson is leaving the courthouse after one of these things, I don't know, constitutional convention or something like that. And there's a lady there, and she asks, you know, how'd it go? How'd it work out? And he says, you have a republic if you can keep it. Well, that's Star Wars. They had a republic. They couldn't keep it. It became corrupt from within, just like the republics do. It became the issue of a bunch of whiny little plastic-haired men in special uniforms with more money and more privilege and more power than any one of them deserves. I don't know if there's any parallels that you can find today. I mean, you guys are in an entirely different nation, and you will not offend me if you refer to the politics of this nation as a little bit screwy.
Yes, a little bit screwy is a bit of an understatement from coming from across the pond.
Yeah, I think though one thing though that we could all at least take, that at least even, you know, by Star Wars level, you know, with it being on such a larger scale, one thing that has always kind of stuck out for me is that scene in Revenge of the Sith where, you know, Padme's like, this is how democracy dies, a thunderous applause. I feel like that rings a lot more truer nowadays than it did, say, like at the time of, like, say, the original Star Wars, or even when that line first came out. I mean, the world's always kind of had a bit of a massive political, well, minefield, essentially, you know, like where we've never really truly been at peace. We've always kind of been at each other's throats in one way or another, because that's, to me, that's the human experience, you know, like, as much as we all want to kind of admit it, where we all just want peace, there's just a lot of people that won't necessarily make it that easy, and even it could be our own people that make it the problem. And I feel like that one line nowadays, even when you think about like global politics or even just your own national politics nowadays, it rings so true, and that just, it kind of just brings up the appreciation for, again, like the prequels that we were saying before. Just these things were a lot more grounded than we originally gave them credit for. Like, even if, you know, people might be a bit snarky about the writing, or, you know, the situations, how, you know, one's a republic going straight into an empire. Yeah, the two different kinds of governing systems, at least, you know, in a fictional world, essentially, or universe, I should say. But they do ring so close to home when you actually read between the lines that you keep thinking that, these things were actually much more open to talking about certain things that we just either chose not to listen to or completely ignore. And when it hits a bit too close to home nowadays, you might look back at it and start thinking that, these scenes are actually a lot better than you thought, when originally you'd probably just end up criticizing them because it's like, oh, the boring government stuff. It just feels so much more realistic than it probably was actually intending to be.
True, and it's probably what's drawing in people now is that they're seeing those parallels and they feel invested more now than before. But keeping on the topic of the prequel, let's fast forward to 2022 when Disney Plus launched the Obi-Wan Kenobi series starring Ewan McGregor. Have you both seen the Obi-Wan Kenobi series?
I haven't yet. That's one of those that I still need to work up to. But I have heard about people's criticisms and such of it. Just mainly a lot of people just saying that the series was, mid, kind of like, for the most part, because it doesn't really know what it wants to be exactly.
Yeah,
which I think
true.
you can kind of say is that the same kind of arguments have been made for similar projects like the Book of Boba Fett, where, it could potentially have been something much more, but because of either like the writing or the lack of ideas or, piggybacking off of other things that you'd seen already, just, revitalized for the series itself. It could be cool, but without, the right kind of storytelling, it kind of falls flat on a lot of people, and that's where a lot of people start saying, I think like something was said before about what we have nowadays, it just, it triggers that, original feeling you had for the stuff you had at the time. And when you look at it now, you're just much more open to want to criticize it just to, because it doesn't meet the same standard of what you were exposed to originally. And, the people that take that the hardest just really wanted to push their opinions above everyone else's, who at least try to, look at the calm before the storm, or look at the best parts of it that, they managed to pull off.
True. But Michael, I'll throw this one to you then, since you've seen the show. How did the series prove the prequel's lasting impact?
I liked it. It made me feel like watching like the Droids cartoon, the Star Wars Droids cartoon again, the original iteration. If you've never watched it, you don't know, but it's made for kids. And I think that's what I think, with the lead of a young Princess Leia and everything surrounding just dealing with a child's story in an adult world like that, you run into some barriers and things that some people are just not going to buy into. They're not going to want to play along with it at all. And I just thought it was fun. It made me feel like I was watching one of the Ewoks movies. They made a couple of Ewoks movies, TV made for TV movies and things like that, because it wasn't meant to be the big on-screen story. It was meant to be a smaller, more personal story that you would have to understand and you would have to want to see as a Star Wars fan to really enjoy, because otherwise I don't think it has a lot of meaning for anybody,
True. But I think for those that were invested in seeing it, I think the series capitalized on the growing appreciation for the prequel trilogy and gave fans more of what they loved from those films.
Yeah, a little bit. I think so.
I think even McGregor.
Well, the look and the feel of it was a lot like those movies, which is something that is tough to recreate when you're talking about new technology versus old technology. When they created that prequel, the original prequel there, that was the dawn of digital film and digital technology and digital cameras, really. I'd only been using a personal digital camera because I was a journalist and I was using them as understanding that this is the new technology. This is the thing that we're moving forward to do with these, and we have to make these things work. And they weren't really good at the time. time. And so, George waited for a long time to make those prequels because he was waiting for the technology to catch up with. And if you look back at it now, it's not real great. I'd rather they go back to matte paintings and the things that they did for the original trilogy, because the computer generated graphics of like the first episode are just terrible. They really are terrible.
It doesn't hold up.
Can't really throw too much in regards to that, but what I actually saw, over the last 6 years, because even when I was at university and I was kind of like out of my Star Wars time, being like a true fan, but I started seeing a bit of additional lore and such like that here and there, and people still talking about it. When I saw the whole concept idea of matte paintings being used in the original, I was absolutely stunned that that's actually how they did some of those
backgrounds,
ones.
right?
And
amazing, right?
When I think about it, about like what you said before about the advancements of technology with digital cameras and such, and seeing about how they were done, in like the prequels, because that's where they were first more or less highlighted in the actual series. I'm actually thinking, wow, you know what? It's like an art form. Like, both are an art form in one way or another if done correctly. But when you take the brilliance and genius of creating a matte painting to then, put in the background essentially to make an area feel whole, or like an entire scene had just been built compared to digital, I can see why a lot of people then would end up just criticizing like dependence on that. Because on the plus side, you can probably make characters look a lot more believable than, say, like 20 years prior, just, going from, say, like puppetry and maybe some
Jar Jar's a good example.
Yeah, exactly.
Because
like, you make him look like a living being instead of just like an oversized puppet.
Mm-hmm. True.
But
it was the background. It was the background. It's very specifically the backgrounds, the characterization, the things that they did with the animation for Jar Jar is just the best example, because he's always there. He's there the whole time, and we all know that nobody looks like that in real life. Well, maybe not in nobody. No, it's fairly obvious that there's a difference in creating a character that's in motion, and that you're really tracking, and you have to follow every move, and you have to use the technology to produce every move and catch every camera angle and everything, whereas the background is static. And so when it doesn't look alive, when there's not light behind it, so like the matte paintings, they would leave spaces in light so light could move behind them. They didn't do things like that with the backgrounds, particularly in the first episode. There are a number of scenes running around the Theed Palace and around the Jedi Palace that it's just like, man, it looks worse. Have you guys seen the new Bill and Ted's movie? Bill and Ted?
Not yet, no.
You haven't seen it? It is a couple of dudes standing in front of a green screen, and that's what some of the stuff really looks like in a couple of the prequel trilogy.
Yeah, I did see a couple of comparisons, like when I said before at university, seeing people talk about it. When I actually looked at some people talking about it as well, it did kind of point out a few to me that it did seem like some people were just kind of cropped into like a backdrop of like a digital rendering. And I do get where you're coming with that. And it just made me appreciate the matte painting so much more, that, it felt more like it had more breath of life put into it than, trying to realistically picture people in these kind of in these kind of environments with digital technology. Not necessarily to say it's bad, but it does kind of give at least a rise to...
It worked.
Yeah,
it did what it was supposed to do. It gave you the size. It gave you that size, because that's where it really shows, right? What we're talking about is these big backgrounds. That there's more space in the background than there is characters and things that you're focusing on, and that's where it's super distracting.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's just kind of similar to like when we talked about things previously on the podcast, just, like taking risks. I guess you could kind of say the Phantom Menace was kind of like taking risks with the advancement of digital technology. And, if they find out what worked, what doesn't work, they can kind of,
take the underwater. The underwater is great.
Oh, yeah, no doubt about it. That was one of my favorite scenes.
Yeah, no, it's great. And the only thing that kind of ruins is when that Gungan sub pops out of the water and it's all just kind of a prop.
Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah, they made it all look realistic and well. That's amazing what
I
they
know, it just
did with
wasn't the
technology
same.
back then. Absolutely insane. Um, but also, Alex, funny how you mentioned that university was when you started dropping off of the Star Wars stuff, because that's what brought me back in with the new stuff that they brought up, the Mandalorian stuff, the Obi-Wan series.
Sure.
All that's kind of what drew me back into the Star Wars world. And I feel like the Disney Plus series felt like it was part of the prequel ever, bringing the new generation of fans growing up in the Disney Plus era to a previous era of the franchise. And it really is quite interesting what they were able to do there. But I think the Obi-Wan series getting massive viewership proves that prequel nostalgia is real money for Disney. But would you guys say that the financial success equals artistic vindication?
Certainly in the corporate world, it does.
Hmm.
It obviously doesn't in the fan world.
Mm.
I
True,
guess it
true.
just depends. Like for me personally, I'd be thinking like instead of measuring it based on like money earned or whatever, because if you get one bit of success, but ultimately people are just left disappointed afterwards. You're not really learning. You're just looking at like where the money's coming from. Like if it's coming in and it's because of one big massive hype, and then you just don't take on board any criticisms or what people have to say about it, then that hype you've just built up, you'll just immediately kill with like the same things that come out that you don't end up changing. So there is risk and
But
reward
there's
for this
a
kind of stuff,
line.
but yeah, it just depends who's behind it in the end. Like, if it's Dave Filoni, you could guarantee he'd definitely, be focusing much more on the fans, like their reactions, probably taking it on board, thinking, all right, we might have made a bit of a mistake here. We'll just see what we can do to try and change that and make it a bit more appealing. But then, just depends who's really behind the project in the end, because if they don't care enough to try and fix it, but keep the idea that they had going, I feel like even if you make a lot of success, you're just going to piss a lot of people off.
Yeah, sure. I definitely see that. But as we start to draw towards final takes here, let's jump into the quick hot take round. So, as usual, I'll give a hot take, and you guys give me a response to it. So let's start off with The Phantom Menace is the worst Star Wars movie. Michael, let's get your view on that.
That's a high bar. This is the way. It may be the worst Star Wars movie for some people, but that's still a high bar because the worst Star Wars movie is better than most other movies. There are some great movies out there. Come on, Forrest Gump. Let's see, a Taxi Driver. Come on, there's some amazing artistic human pieces out there. But when you look at Star Wars that way, that's what it is. It's a huge artistic vision or autistic vision, depending on which part of it you're looking at, and it's beautiful. It's a human experience, and no, it's not the worst of them. I don't know what the worst one is. I don't know that maybe it's just the worst one because there has to be an order.
Mm,
Yeah.
Alex, your take.
Well, I never actually thought The Phantom Menace was a bad film. Like, again, me being someone who was raised mostly on the prequels, at least, canonically speaking, in terms of like episode 1 all the way through to the now 4, 5, and 6, I never thought it was a bad film. I mean, there were so many things in there I enjoyed as a kid that even nowadays, if my opinion slightly differed, I'd still say it's not a bad film all around. It's just a bit different because there's a lot more, new concept ideas thrown into one film that we didn't see in previous things leading to that. Because aside from obviously, talking about like the settings of the actual world itself at the time, I feel like we've covered that enough. We get to see like expanded ideas of like, we get to see pod racing, for example, because I know a few people out there probably would say that the pod racing part was probably just too boring, or the whole
Right.
Tatooine part was just just like pointless filler in the film. But I actually enjoyed that, especially because it gives a really nice and tragic but also humbling start to this guy who's going to basically be behind galactic genocide in the end of the day. And when you see just these small moments like that, it just gives you a more appreciation for where the prequels would go from there. So whilst it does have, its, boring-esque moments, I guess, I never really saw it as a bad film. So I personally have to disagree just with anyone who says it's the worst one, because again, like what Michael said, there's worse films out there than The Phantom Menace. And if we're just focusing just like on the Star Wars stuff, even nowadays, I'd say even if it were on the lower end of, the ratings for the film, I'd personally say Phantom Menace does not come close to being the worst Star Wars film.
Yeah, I agree with that, especially with some of the
Well, we haven't
shocking
talked about
purple
them, so
scenes.
don't bring them up now.
Save it for
Yeah, I'll do
another
that for a later
episode. You
time.
could have like a whole 2 hours where we could actually
Yeah.
discuss what is the worst Star Wars episode if you wanted. But let's
Yeah,
just
later
say
time.
it's not.
But with regards to the Phantom Menace, actually it wasn't that bad, and I actually gave, me more of a video game enthusiast. It gave for some great video games, especially like the pod racing stuff.
Yeah. Still a great game.
One of my favorite memories from the Phantom Menace actually comes from the Lego Star Wars game. So I remember playing it
Yeah.
in my younger days with the legs just walking away after chop off Darth Maul.
Yeah, it's great.
Hey, do you guys remember, like, with the original Lego Star Wars game, how it came out before Revenge of the Sith, and it basically spoiled the entire film for anyone watching, and how it even had, like, discontinued concepts, like the clones disguised as Jedi, because that was actually meant to be a concept, but then it got scrapped, and they'd already gone ahead with the idea, so they just kept it in the video game, and that's why we had that whole level. But,
that's
God,
awesome.
that was peak. Like, if you were into Star Wars from the film, you were into Star Wars because of the video game.
Yeah,
right.
I was more video game person. I love the Lego games. We played them like crazy during my younger days.
And huge.
Same here. Like they were absolutely peak, and I feel like that just kind of adds to the appreciation again, not just for the prequels or the original trilogy, but for like Star Wars as a whole. Because even like even though Lego games are advancing in terms of how they started off at, let's face it, that was such a flagship video game that not only did it have impact on Lego, but it had impact on people getting into and appreciating Star Wars, even if obviously the films are not as goofy or as silly as the Lego games made them out to be.
No,
like,
Lego
every clone trooper getting hit by a rock.
They're supposed to be. And a testament to it is that that style of game continues through the Lego game line, and when they've tried to do other things, the only thing that they've been able to do is just basically go back to that same model. All the other universe stuff and things that they've tried over the years that has been less successful, they just go right back to that same basic format that wander around in a world with characters and build stuff.
Even Alex, when you mentioned like the Lego games, I think they were definitely better. The Star Wars Lego games were definitely better before than the new one that came out recently.
Yeah.
My love for the prequels became stronger by playing the old Lego games. Like that's what made me love the prequels even more.
Makes sense.
But let's go into the next take then. Hayden Christensen's performance wasn't actually that good.
Do you want to start that one, Michael? Or do you want me to?
No, you go ahead. I'd like to think about that one for a second.
Well, firstly, I am a fan of Hayden. Like, I actually was going to go to a con to meet him last year, but I couldn't because it conflicted with my work schedule, so I wouldn't have been able to go. But my friend luckily was. But I just want to point out there saying that what I say is going to be a bit biased because obviously I am a fan of him, even if it's just, from him being Anakin Skywalker. But I will say some of his dialogue is written to kind of be a bit off, like, the whole part in episode 2 saying, like, I don't like sand. I mean, it's become a meme at this point. Let's face it. It's not just a line in the film. It's a meme at this point. Like, generally, like, me trying to flirt, I don't like sand. But... But I will say, whilst obviously how he might have how he might have gone off with it. I think it's more the writing problems to go with it to begin with, but I think it's also just generally just whether or not he was unsure about the role at the time, because obviously he's just been brought in on episode 2. He wasn't obviously there for episode 1, because Anakin would have been like a whole decade
He should
younger.
have been.
And
He should have been there. They should have planned ahead for that, and he should have been there, and he should have been on the scene and participating in that development of the younger character.
Yeah, but if there's anything to at least go for it, his fight choreography and his dedication to that was really good.
Right?
Like, I know that the fighting choreography was a lot different for the prequels than the original trilogy, because the original trilogy focused more like,
not even.
Yeah, like original trilogy was more like, you're swinging a sword at someone. Like, it felt like basic level combat. Like, you're trying to throw a punch at someone, but it's a lightsaber instead. But the prequels kind of incorporated like a dancing motion enthusiasm to it to make it, much more cinematic. And well, if we go for his acting at least like that, then I'd say he steals any scene he's in, because he's probably the most dedicated fighter when it comes to Star Wars, next to Ewan, obviously. But when it comes to the dialogue acting and that, in general, I'd blame it more on the writing than him as an actor, at least at the time, with the experience he has, especially for this kind of genre. So I'd say he is a good actor. It's just he probably just didn't have much going for him, considering he only at the time had 2 roles in episode 2 and 3 as Anakin, and he was basically just a slave to whatever he was given. Essentially, he could add his own things in. Obviously, he's the face behind the character, but I'd say it's just like what we said with some of the Batman films. Just it's like worse writing and hindering his potential as the actor, and that's just kind of where some people come across saying he wasn't that good. But again, I'm a bit biased, but that's my opinion. I think great actor, just his writing just hindered him.
Yeah, look, he's Laurence Olivier, not maybe Tom Hanks. I don't know if you see the comparison, but he's a face and he's a body. He's a swordsman. He's not necessarily brought in to act. Maybe just deliver the lines, deliver the message, deliver the story. And I think you're probably right, Alex. I think there was a maybe a trepidation is the word, maybe a huge layer of trepidation coming in there. I think they should have, like I said, when you were saying, it should have introduced Hayden to the universe before he became that character, and maybe that would have helped ease him into it a little bit. But I don't know. Look, I'm watching Star Wars. I'm not watching. And I can't. That's the thing about it. I can't come. Some people think Gone with the Wind is this amazing film, and there's all this wonderful, supposedly wonderful dialogue and delivered so wonderfully by these characters. And you want to talk about bad sets and bad colors and things that don't go real well together. Watch that movie. Jeez. Yeah, I don't know. He's not the worst actor ever, and he's probably not the worst actor in any of the Star Wars movies. And I never thought of it that way. I never looked at it that way. I never thought that his character was out of line. I thought his character was perfectly fine for who he's to become.
Yeah, like I feel like if anything, his acting, at least, for whatever quality you want to deem it, I actually feel like it does actually, benefit Anakin, because again, when you look at like the little details, like it kind of does show that he is kind of just out of his league, just who he is, because again, he's a guy who's just been brought in to a Jedi Order where he's basically been criticized by every single member of the council.
He's just been told he's this destroyer of the world or savior of the world or whatever. Yeah.
Literally,
exactly, and like when you hear all this and probably think like all the weight on his shoulders, like if anything, that I think that just adds to like the general uncertainty with his with the acting we get, like say episode 2 in that, because again, he's only meant to be 19 years old. He's got all this responsibility and such. You'd probably think like he's going through a bit of an identity or like some kind of personality crisis where he's trying to be what he knows he needs to be, but it's just things like that. It's just, obviously, I know it's not meant to, make him seem much better by comparison, but
No.
the character of Anakin is not meant to just, be this certain person. Like, honestly, who's ever certain when they're like 19 years old?
Literally.
Yeah,
Not
like
that
no
one.
one. Like, when you look at it like that, he's a lot better as an actor, but I don't think the stories are exactly written with that kind of idea, because they're all, I guess, just trying to write it as if he doesn't already have these flaws, or they're not, on screen until, like, the massive issues happen, like where his mum dies and he just goes berserk on the Tusken Raiders. You don't see it until it's actually there, but that's just another personal thing I'll just add there. Just the character of Anakin isn't already, like some like grown adult who already come to peace with who he is. Like, he's got a lot of problems going on behind the scenes that obviously the film just doesn't highlight well enough or at all. And when you see it compared to the dialogue given, it makes a bit more sense, like why some of his dialogue might seem a bit weird, because he's probably a bit of a nervous person.
Yeah.
At least, that's just a deep dive, obviously, just assuming that is actually how Anakin is, because I always just kind of think he's just putting on a mask.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Hayden Christensen wasn't that bad. For me, he was always one of my favorites. When I was a kid, I loved Anakin, even though there were some whiny bits or some bits of the script that was like ish. But for the most part, I love the character. I love the actor. Alex, we touched upon the battle choreography. Oh, amazing! Two of my favorite battles from Star Wars is Obi-Wan and Anakin versus Count Dooku, and Obi-Wan versus Anakin. They're absolutely insane battles. That.
Well, here's the thing: the redemption story's already been told.
Yeah.
He's already redeemed by the time we come to this story of him as a youth. So you don't have to endear him to people.
True.
You probably shouldn't. If
Yeah.
you're paying attention.
True, you want to show why he became Darth Vader.
Yeah, when you think of like the story as well, like they've already done like the main story. This is the prequels. You usually see someone's fall and then someone's redemption. We'll look at it in reverse. Like they literally have to write this guy to be so flawed that this is literally a little boy. They have to take him from a little boy who is a slave, who was only born to a mother. There's no father involved. Who was basically created by the Force to become essentially the one who brings peace. But that doesn't guarantee that he's going to have a happy life. He could probably just have the worst life ever. He's just been told this is what's going to happen, and eventually he gets manipulated by an older man and he commits galactic genocide. But you kind of got to tell story in reverse, essentially. Instead of giving him the redemption he needs, you've got to tell it like he has to be redeemed without knowing what happens to begin with. And this is their way of just saying, all right, we just got to make Darth Vader really a bad person, give him the credit he deserves from the original trilogy, so let's just do this.
Yeah, well, they certainly sealed that up with the killing all the kids in Revenge of the Sith. That was just such a poignant moment and such a big deal, and it made that movie a better movie than it would have been without it.
Yeah, I mean, the first Jedi in that scene in Revenge of the Sith, when the younglings are hiding in the main chamber, like, apparently the boy Jedi was actually designed that way because it was meant to kind of represent Anakin when he was a child himself.
Sure.
And so when he activates the lightsaber, it's like killing his old self. Like, Anakin's gone, he's only Darth Vader, or, this is the end of Anakin and the beginning of Vader, just, depending on how you want to look at that scene. So... yeah, just again, just like another little prop thing just to add to, why people probably been a bit too critical on the prequels. They had a lot of really good imagery that you probably wouldn't even think of at first, because no way am I thinking about, he looks a bit like Anakin, he's just killed himself. I'm not thinking that watching it, but on rewatches you might end up thinking, you know what, a lot better than I first gave it credit for.
Yeah. All right, let's jump on to the next thing then. The prequels have better world building than the originals. Michael?
Yeah, far better. We kind of already hit on it once. Those original worlds were very, very bland, very much. It was a swamp world. It's a fire world. They still did that. They still carried through with that sort of thing. The whole Mustafar planet being nothing but a volcanic planet, which is much more realistic than some of the other ones that they came up with. But no, I think the world building, that was one of the bigger problems with those movies, right? Is because they really spanned a galaxy, not just the story of a small band of people in the galaxy that are hanging out doing some things, and every once in a while you got to follow one this direction, one the other direction. He's trying to tell the story of the Republic. He's with these other characters at the center of the story of the Republic.
Yeah, I've got to agree with that as well, because when you look at most of the planet introductions in the original trilogy, they just either become like a pit stop on the way, or they just become like the main scene of where it's focused. Like the Death Star, for example, you get a bit of the Death Star at least, but not like what you probably would imagine would happen if they did the Death Star like nowadays, at least, with the scenery given. And if you took, like, say, Episode 4, for example, when you look at Tatooine, you only really see like Luke's place, then you see Mos Eisley, and that's it. But you do get a bit of an introduction to some characters, but then when you compare it to Tatooine in Episode 1, you get so much more. You don't only just get, seeing Anakin where he's at, you also see, like, some of the, wretched scum and villainy that you kind of expected from Episode 4, like, where you see Watto, like, he's not, like, the worst person, but he is kind of shady, and he's a bit of a jackass, that he is very unaccommodating to people, especially strangers outside of Tatooine. But then you get to see a bit more, like, essentially like cultural kind of aspects, like, again, the pod racing, where you probably wouldn't see that on anywhere else. And compared to that to any of the other worlds that you get as well in that one, like Coruscant as well, you got civilizations being shown, you get like a general feel of a world. And what did Episode 4 give us? Basically Tatooine and the Death Star, because the only other planets were the Forest Moon of Yavin, where the base was, before the Battle of Yavin, and Alderaan. And let's face it, we only saw Alderaan from space. We did not see anything happen on that planet apart from a green light hitting it and blowing it to space rocks. That does not really build a world. That just creates a character intended to die.
The opposite of world building, isn't it?
Yeah, world destroying. But like the prequels definitely built upon that, at least giving us so much more for it. And the fact that they even made Tatooine seem more
because
interesting.
Again, this is one of the things that existed. It was one of the things that was understood. We all knew what Coruscant would be. We were all the people, for 20 years before there was a vision of Coruscant, or even before the end of, when they redid the trilogy, the original trilogy, and the special editions, and they showed all the various planets celebrating at the end, and they shoehorned in those planets that they wrote into the new trilogy, basically. But we already all knew that Coruscant was basically just one big, planet covered in city, and that there was, so there was an expectation to make certain things a real place that people understood and heard of. And you get to go to the diner in the second movie, and you get to go down into the slums and into the lower parts of the city where the less desirable people are, and they carry that storyline over into the Clone Wars cartoon, and it just much bigger universe by the time you get to the prequel trilogy.
Yeah, it's kind of like where you make a planet an equal character to like the people in the show, where it's either shown so frequently or it's so well known and renowned that you basically know general facts and all sorts about them, like what people would say their favorite fact is about their favorite character. You'd end up having these same kind of opinions regarding the planets and thinking, is this a safe place? Is this a hostile place? Do these people side with the Empire, the CIS? Do they side with the Republic? What's their general position? If when you build worlds like that, even if you don't get a lot of interesting characters who come from there, it does kind of build a background for like the people who do come from these places, and get an idea, like, if this person's coming from a peaceful world, why are they so war torn? If this person's from a planet that's generally pacifistic, why is this person generally, generally kind and wanting to, not engage in conflict. It just makes for a much more better dynamic because, you don't just get people who are written as a stereotype. You get people written as a moral background from where they come from. And I feel like, again, you kind of reflect that kind of thing from people and where they come in the world nowadays. Like someone saying, I'm from the US, I'm from Canada, I'm from the UK, I'm from Egypt. You get all these people, and obviously they're a reflection of where they come from, and that's just what the planets are in Star Wars, or what they should be.
Exactly.
They're supposed to be like characters.
Exactly, and like you said, you get reflections, and you get the feel like the place. For example, with Naboo, with the Gungan city, with the Cathedral Palace, with Coruscant, with the Senate building, the Jedi Temple, Tatooine, Genesis with that where they had with General Grievous and the battleground, and Mustafar. Like I can name these places, and all of a sudden you're seeing visions of these different places and whatnot in your head because of the world building that the prequels delivered on.
Yeah, at least you're not thinking of it like Tatooine's the orange planet, Dagobah's the greeny blue planet, and you're not thinking like Mustafar, that's the red planet. You're not thinking that. You're thinking like the general characteristics of it, and you're thinking of what happened there exactly. And the significance of what they mean to people in their story, like how Anakin's full-on transformation into a full-on Sith, you could argue, starts on Coruscant, but it's exemplified on Mustafar, a planet that literally is on fire, that is so uninhabitable that it's literally destroying things.
Yeah, you can see you can kind of see the rock formations, you can see the lava bursting or whatnot when you're thinking of the battle, when you're thinking of just before, when everyone's talking to Anakin, and when they're mentioning having the whole dialogue whatnot, you can kind of see the ship, you can kind of just see everything because of that world building they did. Let's go on to the next take then. Jar Jar Binks is overhated.
He's what?
I definitely would say so, yes.
Overhated?
Yeah, overhated.
Yeah. Yeah, like I said earlier, he's no worse than C-3PO in those terms. He's a very classic sort of character in storytelling. He plays the hapless fool who can't help but ultimately be successful in what he does. Except then, of course, obviously there are some people that argue that he's a Sith, and they have that whole dark Jar Jar mythology that exists there, and that so much of what happened and so much of how they were able to grab power and create their empire happened because of Jar Jar and manipulating Jar Jar, and that it wasn't manipulating, and that he was a willing participant in it. But that's not part of the stories.
I mean, I think it has kind of been technically canonized by Lego. Didn't they do like a Darth Jar Jar kind of thing with like the Darth Falcon? Jar Jar. I mean, obviously that's, it's not pure canon, it's like fan canon at most, it's all fanfic kind of stuff. But it is kind of funny to think that, like the quote, the greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world he didn't exist. Like Jar Jar's like the ultimate evil, but because he was so like comically written, or at least in the first one where he was like the goofiest character on the planet, that you would not have thought this guy was like the ultimate Sith. Like he was so un-Sith-like. He was so less of a threat than we gave him credit for, that it turned out this guy was literally playing the strings behind everything.
It's an interesting
I don't actually
theory.
know how I'd appreciate if that was actually true or not, but
it doesn't matter. It's a fun story.
No, I love this whole Jar Jar Binks being Sith. It's amazing, and it kind of makes sense a bit. I really do enjoy that story of the whole Darth Jar Jar.
Yeah, I feel like when you just look at what we just talked at, like in those 2 minutes alone, I think that just proves that Jar Jar definitely is overhated. Because even if he's hated just because, again, like he was written just a bit too cartoony, like you have the comic relief in, but instead of them being like sarcastically comical or something like that, they're just generally goofy, and it's like, how is this person alive on this battlefield with warriors who are probably like more deserving to live than he is? At least with being able to handle themselves, how is he alive? Just I feel like with him not having like a pure purpose aside from just being the comic relief, that's just kind of where the hate comes from. But then when you kind of see like how skilled he is, at least with handling situations in like his own unique way, in both the Clone Wars and in Episode 2, with giving the Chancellor emergency powers for the clone army whilst the war's going on, you can kind of see that he is capable like other people. It's just he was told he was clumsy. He's demonstrated that, and he was goofy as hell. But I feel like people just overhate just the idea that someone like that is in their story and they just can't tolerate it. But in the end, maybe it was a bad idea that they've managed to fix with a bit more stronger writing and showing that he is just like everyone else, just silly, and that's how some people are sometimes. Like, I'll even admit I'm a bit of a Jar Jar here and there, but it doesn't mean I'm a bad person, doesn't mean I'm deserving of hate or whatever. It just means I'm just me in the end of the day, and that's who Jar Jar is. I feel like some people are just too quick to judge when, you could give a character so much more purpose if you just give better writing and better situations for them to be in. And I feel like they kind of flipped him over into what I'd argue to say is someone who is actually pretty decent at what they do. I mean, look what he managed to accomplish, at least with all the stuff relating to the prequels. Not much, but he at least was put in the Senate for a reason, not just because, they needed to have him around. They could have just retconned him out the story, but they didn't. Probably because there were some people out there who cared enough for him and as a Gungan representative to make him, want to stand out more. And look at how well cemented Jar Jar is in Star Wars lore. He's not just a forgettable character from Episode 1.
No, everyone knows who Jar Jar is. Even if you're not a fan of Star Wars, you know who Jar Jar is. Like, he became sort of an icon. So,
let's not forget, though, in the Lego game as well, Jar Jar was able to jump higher than the average Jedi. I mean, that alone, just that small little detail just goes to show that you can't just hate someone because of like who they are. Like, granted, he's not as goofy in the Lego games as he is the film, but he has more purpose in the Lego game than a lot of people realize, because without him, he wouldn't be able to do this. Just like without Jar Jar, maybe the Chancellor might not have gotten the emergency powers as easily as he needed to. And, Jar Jar wouldn't have been like Padme's sympathetic friend because, they're in the same situation as each other. And then Padme's the only person Jar Jar can look for, a fellow representative of Naboo. Now that, the Chancellor is obviously the Chancellor. He's not just a senator anymore. He's in a whole other league on his own. And that's just my take on it, though. Just, I don't feel like people just realize that people can obviously change for the better, and how they handle Jar Jar just shows that the hate just isn't really worth it.
No, and I don't really get the hate either, especially like a character that was started off as just being comic relief. Like, why would you hate comic relief? Like, that doesn't make sense. Like, no, they definitely overhated. But let's go on to the next thing then. The Clone Wars is better than any prequel film. So, Alex, I'll start with you.
I actually can't answer that one, because when I think about all the good stuff the Clone Wars gave us versus all the stuff the live action gave us, I'd say Clone Wars definitely had like the better characterization and, character development. But some stuff in the live action prequel films that we got, even if you recreated in animation, like someone recreated using similar looking assets for the Clone Wars and even the voices for Anakin and Obi-Wan's duel on Mustafar, it was still great, but I always prefer thinking about it in live action just because I feel like it captures, the feelings a bit better. But it's too hard to say exactly, because they're both good in their own rights. But I'm gonna have to just say that I prefer what the storytelling such that we got in the prequels compared to the storytelling that we got in the Clone Wars, because I feel like it gives you more focus on something for a much longer time than something that either builds up over say 2 episodes and then moves along to something else. That's just my personal opinion for it, but that's not to say that the Clone Wars didn't do things better than the prequels. But I would probably say the prequels over the Clone Wars. Even though I know that's probably gonna have a few people probably pointing a gun at me just for saying. Don't worry, they probably have the aim of a stormtrooper. I'm sure I'll be fine.
Michael, how about you? Do you think the Clone Wars is better than any prequel film?
Yeah, I mean it's just so much more complete of a story than there's so much space in between those. The entire Clone Wars series fits in that space between the second and third movie there. So it's there's a whole universe of happening there, and there's so much more to this story in terms of developing. That was talked about who Anakin is and why he becomes Darth Vader.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I do think that both the prequel and the Clone Wars like bring their own thing to the table. So I don't know if any is better than the other, but I do love the both of them. That's for sure. Let's go on to next take then. George Lucas deserved creative control. Michael,
He what?
he deserved creative control.
Creative control. Well, when he had it, the vision was a little more singular. It was a little more tied together. There wasn't just that shotgun approach that we were talking about that sort of Disney and Kathleen Kennedy has adopted and trying to hit every single little spot on the target instead of just aiming for the bullseye and doing it right. And again, it's all a matter of opinion about whether or not those prequels were right and they're the right thing. I think just our conversation today says that they were the right thing. They were the right thing at the right time, and they were the right expression for that singular vision, and that singular vision is always going to be. I don't know how it's not a better vision than the committee version, because you're just trying to appease and please too many people.
Yeah, and that's when it starts spiraling out of control, trying to please all these different parts and whatnot. Alex, how about you?
Normally, I would say that if you were the person that kind of shotgunned the whole thing to begin with, like, with a writer-director kind of situation, I feel like if you're the person that understands the world a lot more that you're creating, then you should at least have more creative control than what people are willing to give you. Especially, if people who are, say, financing the whole thing say that they don't want to see this, they want to see more of this, fair enough. If you're financing something and you want something out of it, then I believe if you're giving that much money that, your opinion should have some kind of value on it, then fair enough. But again, yeah, like what Michael just said, I agree a lot with what he just said. But I will say that at least with George Lucas not having control, like when we look at what we have now, it does give us kind of a larger variety of different kind of aspects to looking at Star Wars, instead of it just being the same singular story with, the same kind of writing told over and over again. But
True.
obviously, some of it's successful, some of it isn't. But for the most part, I would probably say that if George Lucas did have more creative control, we might have potentially seen a much more, what's the right word here? A lot more in sync Star Wars storytelling than, what we have now, and maybe more, fan and critic reactions would be a bit more, tied together, and they'd be a bit more in sync with each other, where you're seeing like the same kind of things to praise and criticize and change. Potentially, it could have made Star Wars less, less focusing on aiming to appease everyone, that it ultimately appeases no one, and it might have made it a bit more enjoyable for all types of people that both want to watch it for entertainment and to watch it to spark debate and criticize. But it's kind of hard to tell, because that could also mean that most of what we have now might not exist, or even exist to the degree it would. And maybe it's for the right reasons he didn't have creative control. Like, what if, say, the animated Clone Wars never existed? What if we never got, like, the in-depth characteristics of Captain Rex, for example, Domino Squad, Cad Bane? What if we never got anything like that, Maybe it was for the best, but I would probably say maybe if he had more creative control, maybe Star Wars would be one of those ones where it's like it's less toxic and it might be a bit more enjoyable for everyone to enjoy, just seeing how, concise and similar the writing is all around for all the parts that we got.
I definitely agree with that. Personally, shotguns the whole project will probably be the one who understands the stories and the vision the most. but at the same time, like you wouldn't get some of these stories that have been told that have added much more to the lore of Star Wars and has built upon those worlds and whatnot. So it is a tricky situation there. But I think in the end, yeah, the person who knows the story the best should be the one with more creative control. But let's jump onto the final take then. The prequel memes are why people love these films now. Alex?
I think it just builds on nostalgia. Like, I think it's fair to say that memes over like film and storytelling, they evolve, They go from being like simple and basic, and now most memes are kind of, like a snap grab or like a quote from a film that's just put over a certain situation. But I feel like it just plays on the memories and the sentimentality of what it comes from, and just how it makes you realize how related it is to real life, and I guess that just makes people appreciate things much more. Like, I made the joke earlier about like Hayden Christensen as Anakin's whole I don't like Stan, that's like his flirting capabilities, and then you're thinking, wow, you know what, that's on the same level as me. I can actually enjoy that by laughing at it. And I just feel like, personally, that's part of the reason, again, why I wanted to start giving Star Wars more of a shot again and start looking at like the Clone Wars and all the other things again back in full depth, because I've seen the live action films enough that I know exactly how they all play off, but seeing everything else just makes me want to watch it again even more. And I personally would say the memes are part of the reason. Obviously, most of it's like the community and like how great their fan projects and such like that are, and people just showing off the cool merchandise kind of things that you get from Star Wars. But I'd say the memes definitely just intrigued me enough to, start looking at it more in depth and just enjoying it for what we had, rather than, just thinking that this is just a boring film, or that just to get through like an hour and a half or an hour and 45 minutes of my time, that I can at least say that I didn't completely hate, So I'd say it's definitely made me appreciate it a lot more. But again, that appreciation was kind of still there because I grew up on the prequels.
Yeah. Yeah. Michael?
The question, yeah, because I'm not sure I caught the question.
The prequel memes are why people love these films now.
Oh, yeah, I don't know. I guess I don't know. I don't, because it's not me, right? I'm almost unfamiliar. I could talk about memetics all day. I understand how memetics works, and it's something that has been that's been recognized in my time, and they understand that our genes sort of work the same way, and it's just a way of carrying information forward and values forward. And I think that then, if there's some meme structure or that's been developed out of these stories, I think it says everything that needs to be said about those stories. I think it tells you that they are what we've said all along, the human stories, and that there isn't anything particularly wrong with them, that they do reflect us as a people, and they reflect a time and space, and they bring us back to a place that we were in a long time ago. They do everything that a meme is supposed to do, and everything that genes are supposed to do, if you want to get down to it.
Yeah, true. I think memes definitely help, like, kind of contain the memory, because you see a meme and it reminds you of certain parts of the movie. It reminds you of parts you love. And like, I think there are definitely a good bunch of memes out there which just take from like the fun parts of the movie, and that's the parts that people tend to remember more. So definitely think that the memes, probably not why people love these films now, but it's definitely got something there.
They keep them in the culture. They keep them in the forefront, and keep people remembering. And then other people don't see, they've never seen them before. And then, what's this? I don't know that character. I don't recognize that character. Well, that's Luke Skywalker. That's Boba Fett. That's
Yeah, exactly.
yeah.
If
All
I
right.
if I expose yourself just to like the visuals of it, like even if you didn't know what it was for exactly, if you get exposed to it
Right.
long enough, it might, even generate the interest in you to actually want to engage with it. Like, I'll be honest, I'm raising my hand here right now saying that's what got me into wanting to read One Piece. Like, I never watched
Fair
it, but I
enough.
started reading the mangas, and some people might do that with Star Wars. Someone might have been a
Yeah.
Star Trek fan their entire
Yeah,
life.
sure, why not?
See like a bunch of Star Wars memes and be like, "Oh, I'll give it a shot then, see
You
what
gotta
it's
watch
like," and
this
then
Star
next thing you
Wars
know, they
thing.
love
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
It's just like that. Sometimes maybe it's just like the small little influences that the memes have of like a small snapshot of a story that it generates general interest in you to want to look at it. And then if that interest is strong enough to survive like the brief, introduction to it, like when you find a new hobby, you might just end up thinking, you know what, I think I'd like to get more into this, see much more of it. Because I feel like that's just how we are as people, we find something that just stirs a bit of interest in us. And if we're willing to go far enough to explore that, to see how far we're willing to, be invested in it, some people might even then just say they got introduced to it because of a meme and then they just enjoyed it because, of what it actually was and appreciate it for its true worth. And that's just it in the end of the day. So that's probably where part of that comes from. But it probably just hits a bit closer for home to sentimental fans because of how memes have evolved over time and just been, something that's just like a brief snapshot of memory.
Yeah, that's it. It's pretty much kind of stores that memory. You look at it, and all of a sudden you unlock a memory of a certain piece of media, literature, whatever. And that's what memes have become. Sort of a memory holder. But I think as we draw to a close here, we've covered the hate, the love, the Clone Wars, the memes, and all the different perspectives. I think now it's time for final verdicts. Did the prequels earn their redemption, or are we collectively gaslighting ourselves? Michael, let's start with you.
Well, I'm definitely not collectively gaslighting myself. I just have an interesting perspective, certainly from the composition of the particular panel here, just having been around for the original trilogy and having the utmost respect for and enjoyment from, love for the prequel, not putting on it any of the things that all the other people put on top of it, all the expectations, all the that's just the word. That's just it. It's just the expectation that it's going to be something that it's not, that it's going to be the thing you want it to be, as opposed to the vision of some other people, some other person, all these other people who are responsible for creating it. And if you go in with the attitude, with anything, if you go in with the attitude, you expect it to be what you needed and want it to be, and then you are destroyed when it doesn't live up to those expectations, I got news for you. Life's gonna suck for you.
True. You can't just hold yourself onto expectations. But Alex, how about you? What's your verdict there?
Can you remind me of the question again, please?
Did the prequels earn their redemption, or are we collectively gaslighting ourselves?
Well, I don't personally think there was anything necessarily to redeem, because again, I've always loved them just for as they are, but when I start seeing people, show much more appreciation for them, I guess, we've seen how the sequels compared to the prequels with the original trilogy, and just seeing people think, you know what, these aren't too bad. You see it all the time with all sorts of films, especially those with like different timelines and that, for storytelling. I always think they've always kind of had, their big moments, and it took a while for people to finally accept them, just for the storytelling, the visuals and all that we got. It just took a bit longer than probably expected, probably because the people who were groundhogs into this thing probably just kind of started growing a bit too strong a backbone, maybe, to accept this kind of new idea of how the story's to be told. Not to say that they're right or they're wrong in their beliefs. It's just some people might just accept that some change is a bit too hard to take, and they might have seen the prequels as probably one of those changes that they just didn't really agree with. And to see people finally appreciating them outside of the general, like one moment where they thought, you know what, that scene was all right, and just start thinking that the films are better than they remember. It's just something to be a bit happy about, seeing that people are finally giving them the true shot that they deserve.
For sure. And with all that take on the prequels and perspectives, I think here's my perspective on it. Definitely better than critics remember. For sure, we've had goofy moments and we have some creative decisions that's a bit but they're also ambitious, visually stunning, and built a galaxy that inspired decades of storytelling. We had like some truly amazing moments in the prequels, even if there was some poor direction. The truth is that multiple things can be true simultaneously. The prequels have serious flaws that haven't disappeared. The Clone Wars, virtually every criticism fans had was addressed and corrected by giving us better versions of these characters. A generation generally loves these films because they grew up with them, which is us here. Me and you, Alex. The prequels were our childhood. We had we had the memes transforming how we engage with and remember these movies. Some people mentioned how social media has played a crucial role in this re-evaluation, allowing fans to share their love for the prequels and creating a more positive and inclusive Star Wars community. And yeah, I mean, definitely some positive parts from the community, even if there is some toxic hate going on as well that we've brought before with the criticisms. But I think we've also found that just a way to appreciate these prequels. And while there are some parts that are still rough, like The Phantom Menace, still a great movie. We have Revenge of the Sith, which is an amazing movie. Attack of the Clones has moments of brilliance. And as we mentioned, the Clone Wars proved that the foundation Lucas built could support incredible storytelling. And I think the Star Wars franchise is expanding rapidly on many different platforms. And it's just truly amazing to see that these different perspectives and aspects are just really help build upon people's memories. And maybe that's the prequel's real legacy, not perfection, but the potential to be realized by others. So I think, were they always good? I mean, it depends on different people. Are they good now? I mean, that's not really the question to ask. I think the question is, did they matter? And 100% the prequels mattered. They built something for generations to come. So, as we start to wrap up here, I would like to thank you both so much for joining, Alex and Michael. And thank you for taking the fans on this journey through one of cinema's most fascinating redemption arcs. So I think the prequels taught us that art can be rehabilitated, that context matters, that generational perspectives shift, and that sometimes the most interesting stories aren't in the original work, but in how we collectively rewrite its legacy. Whether your team always loved them, team nostalgic revisionism, or team Clone Wars saved everything, the prequels are now an undeniable part of Star Wars DNA. 9 combined seasons and counting of the critically acclaimed The Clone Wars and The Batch truly would have never been made without them. So I think that's something to keep in mind whenever Star Wars is brought up, what is allowed to build and the spin-off that we've been able to get from these prequels. So as we sign off, remember that not to just over criticize and over analyze everything, because sometimes you just got to just enjoy them as they are. Just got to enjoy these movies. Yes, there are some parts that are a bit baffling, but in the end, it's a great movie, and just sit there and enjoy. You don't have to be the next greatest critic. So, as we log off, this is your Guardian, wishing you all a great week and to keep it tight. Excelsior!